Welcome back to another very special episode recorded live from Black Hat 2026 of Cyberbytes the podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Cooper, and today's guest we have Jason Rebholz, the CEO and co-founder of Evoke Security. I hope you enjoy the show.
All right, introducing Jason Rebholz, the
Thanks for
CEO
having me.
and co-founder of Evoke Security. How are you, man?
I'm doing great, yeah. How you doing today?
Yeah, good, thank you, good. We're obviously, you're my first podcast for Black Hat.
So I'm glad to kick it off then.
That's it, exactly, yeah. I would say, like, how's the conference been? But I know the show's only just really started. But yeah, how long you been in? Have you been in a while?
I got in yesterday, it's back-to-back meetings. That's kind of the name of the game for these conferences.
Yeah, exactly. Where are you from originally? Where have you flown in from?
So I came from Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C.
Okay, interesting. So we'll get onto your background and stuff, but I guess it's slightly a different experience going from being a CISO to now being like a founder here. So like the difference and the contrast, which we can maybe talk on a little bit later.
Yeah, I've gone through several iterations of this, so it's a unique perspective, especially now to see it so fresh from being a CISO.
Yeah.
Some interesting stories that pop up.
Love it, love it. Well, with all my guests, Jason, I like to sort of take it right back to how it all began, how you got into the industry.
Yeah, so for me, it was when I was in high school. So I was a nerdy kid, used to speed solve Rubik's Cubes. And at the same time I was doing that, I was learning how to program. And I was fortunate where I was in a school where a math teacher was just getting interested in computer science. And so he launched a computer science class. I was in the very first class that he did this with. And that got me into computer programming. But after 2 years of doing that, I realized I'm not really a programmer. Like, I could do it, but I just didn't enjoy it. What I did enjoy was that Rubik's Cube and solving puzzles. And so I was talking to this teacher at the time, and he goes, hey, you should look at computer networking. And so I was like, all right, so I buy some books on that. I'm reading them cover to cover. And I fell into the security aspect of it. And so it was just this perfect blend of puzzles and technology. And again, just fortunate timing throughout my entire career. It's just been super lucky, because when I went to college, I went to RIT, which was the first college that had a focus on computer security.
Wow.
And so I got a really good exposure to networking, system administration, and security, which really set me up in my career to understand how do you actually look at these systems and these networks from the bottom up, and look at it more as an overarching system versus a series of configurations, which I think is a different way of approaching the problem of security.
I guess that probably helped quite a lot with your career then. But so first job, what was the first role after school?
So I got my first job in security while I was in school. So
Wow.
At RIT, I was working in the information security office, and I was running vulnerability scans of the campus. And this was my first taste of what it was like to work in industry. And I have a very vivid memory of this, where I would run these scans, I would prepare a report, I would send them over to the different teams that needed to do something, and I didn't hear back, ever. And so I got this perception, I was like, oh, do people care about security? But again, just fortunate timing. As I was graduating, I'm looking for different jobs, and I find a posting for Mandiant. And I apply to Mandiant. I had no idea what Mandiant was. I didn't even know what incident response was. Applied there, got the interviews. I actually applied to do pen testing. So I go in, I interview for pen testing, and somehow I think they just took pity on me as a college grad, and they offered me the job. And so I was the very first college hire that Mandiant had, employee 105 there. So it was just one of those things that really set me up for success to go off. And I show up the first day at Mandiant, they hand me a hard drive and they say, here you go, tell us everything that happened. I was like, well, how do I do that? And so I learned forensics on the fly.
Wow. Okay. So how was the experience? Obviously, Mandiant, from when you joined to what the business, and obviously the acquisition that's happened recently. But so what was the experience working at Mandiant at that time like?
So it's interesting, because as a new college grad, you don't know what to expect in professional work environments. So everyone was always smarter than me wherever I went. But at Mandiant, it was this just extreme concentration of talent and mission-driven people. And I've never found this quite the same at any other company I've worked for. Everyone was so bought into the mission, find evil, that was the tagline, right? And when you have that much talent and knowledge and drive, you don't have a choice but to level up. And so for me as a college grad, I'm sitting next to some of the smartest people in industry that I can literally just tap on the shoulder and say, hey, what is this? Like, how should I be thinking about this? And I remember just these different moments of working with different people that just stick with you and really created the foundation for who I was as a working professional that carried me through all of my time doing incident response, but also as a CISO. And I'm very fortunate with Mandiant to just set me up for success at that stage, and just to see the growth that Mandiant had, and to be part of that too, to start to leave my own thumbprint on Mandiant. It was quite the honor at that time.
Incredible. It's also interesting you said about surrounding yourself with smart people at that business. You've got, obviously, Kevin's doing great things now with his new company, and you've got like Marshall over the CEO of DTEX now.
That's right.
To see those people developing through their careers, it's just incredible.
Exactly. And those are the people I call my mentors.
Yeah.
Right? Marshall in particular. I'll never forget traveling with him, and just, he was the engagement lead and I was one of the analysts just working with him, and, close friend to this day. And Kevin, I used to sit outside of his office. Yeah, he tapped me on the shoulder and said, Rebholz, come on, we're going to the Capitol today. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess we are. So it's just your timing is everything in your career, and it's really about making the most of it. And that was just rocket fuel for my career.
Love it. So after Mandiant, what happened for you then?
So at Mandiant, I went through the fire acquisition and stayed on for a couple of years after that. And I wanted to get back to a smaller company. And so I got introduced to a company called Crypsis Group, where I joined. I was employee 5 there, and I built out the professional services team there doing incident response. And this was an area where I got introduced more into the cyber insurance component of it. I did that at Mandiant. I was working with insurance carriers who were paying cyber claims. But with Crypsis, that was our main channel. And so I was able to grow that business from about 1.8 million in revenue to just under 10 million in 18 months by attaching ourselves to the insurance industry. And this was right when ransomware was taking off. So I remember the very first ransomware case that I investigated was this group called SamSam. And this was the first ransomware group that decided they were going to go from a single system encryption to encrypting all of the servers, just the servers, all of the servers in an environment. And they charged, I think it was about $50,000 ransom, which, back then we're like, $50,000, this is crazy. Not thinking that within a year it was going to be $1 million ransoms. And so I was fortunate there where I could see that evolution of ransomware and see it go from, just dedicated groups to ransomware as a service, where you have this whole ecosystem created with the sole purpose of try to extort as many people as you can with these ransomware events.
Was there any of those that you can talk about, even like cases that have maybe stuck with you even to this day that you still maybe think about? Was there any of those?
So interesting enough, one of the things that I did back then was ransom negotiations. And so the first ransom negotiation I did was when I was at Black Hat. I was staying in the Luxor.
No way.
And I'm figuring out how to create, at this point I was just opening up a wallet so I can transfer some funds in there to pay a ransom. Yeah. And so it was always interesting when you would talk with these threat actors, and they're operating on a whole different level, and not in a good way. I'll never forget this. I was working for a children's hospital. Attackers came in, encrypted all these systems, and it was around the holidays. And I go in, I always create a fake persona, and I go in and say, hey, do you guys realize you just encrypted a children's hospital? You're impacting the health of these children. And this guy comes back and goes, don't care, Happy New Year. And that was the first real indication for me where I realized, even though you're dealing with humans, there is no compassion. They don't care. They're just trying to make a buck here, and they don't care about the damage that they're creating, because in their mind, well, it's a U.S. company. They've got insurance. They're covered. They'll get over it. And that was it was a real fundamental moment for me where I'm like, this is just a different level. Because I was by that point I was doing investigations for probably 10 years.
Yeah.
And you saw the attacker through the commands they would execute. When you actually start talking with them and see their mindset, it changes the way you see what this game is.
Yeah, crazy, man. It's like they may have even been in Vegas at the same time. Who knows? Who knows? Great. So then what happened after that part of your career?
So I stayed with startups for the longest time. I went to another company where I did business development and partnerships. That company got acquired. Then co-founded a company where I thought I was done with incident response, but got sucked back into it, and so went from investigating ransomware incidents to helping companies get back up and running. So we'd bring in IT resources, and this was during the height of COVID, where I was coordinating getting 50 plus people on site, 25 plus different locations around the US, and coordinating all those activities, just trying to get somebody back up and running, whether that's rebuilding systems, servers, re-imaging laptops. And so, did that and finally said, I've got to get out of incident response. And so I decided to go down the CISO path.
Yeah.
And, this is where your network really comes into play. I got a job at Corvus Insurance as their CISO. And it was the perfect role for me because, having grown up doing incident response, you run pretty fast. And I was always known as an intense person. And so, getting into a role where it was going to be more operational, I knew I needed to have my hands in a lot of different things just to get that fulfillment. And so when I was interviewing with Corvus, I said, listen, I want to do the internal CISO role because I want to get that experience, but there's other areas I can help with. And so right off the bat, before I even started, I had the CISO role. I had the task of building out a threat intel team and supporting the build out of a risk services team, all focused on protect internal security, but also how do we secure our policyholders? How do we avoid cyber claims? And so I was able to keep kind of my entrepreneurial spirit alive with building, because I've always been a builder. So I was able to start building some of these things out from scratch while also getting that experience as a CISO. And it took me about 2 years to build out the foundation of that security program, get the right components in place, hire the right team, and over time, after that 2-year period, I was able to start leaning more into the threat intel side and the risk services, and we put a program together that we were doing early warning systems for ransomware events and new vulnerabilities that were coming out, where we were saving anywhere from $5 to $7 million in cyber claims by just getting ahead of the problem and notifying a policyholder saying, hey, your credentials just got sold on the dark web.
Yeah.
And we know that when somebody doesn't take action within 24 to 48 hours, ransomware usually follows. So let's get on this. Let's get you the right company to come in, do the investigation, contain this, and you're saving millions of dollars on just even one engagement. A large enough company easily can avoid $1 million cost of an incident response and recovery.
Yeah. I'm really just curious about this actually. So I can imagine there being a lot of policies with just traditional businesses, but I'm just wondering, particularly with the geopolitical stuff that's going on, was there more policies being made within the OT world? Like the operational technology, like oil and gas, utilities, water, that sort of thing?
Well, this was around the time of Colonial Pipeline.
Oh, okay.
So, Corvus, wasn't on that policy, thankfully, but that made people think differently about, okay, what does happen if this starts impacting different systems? When Russia invaded Ukraine, we were doing an analysis of which of our policyholders are potentially at risk here, right? Because you're looking at collateral damage. We had the NotPetya situation where that got out of hand, right? And we know how that happened with Russia behind the wheel there. So we're looking at that saying, which of our policyholders have infrastructure in the Ukraine? What are the companies that Russia might go after? We'll call them the hacktivists that are guided by Russia. Who might they go after if the U.S. gets involved in this war? And so you're constantly looking at where are these soft targets that might happen. That's what we're seeing right now with the war with Iran, where you have water companies that are getting hit across the U.S. And so these are things that nobody thinks that their insurance carrier is doing these things, but behind the scenes, insurance carriers are always looking at where are things going to go wrong, right? Because that their whole business is making sure that there's not a catastrophic event. So even when I was at Corvus, we got acquired by Travelers. I was working with Travelers at what is the potential of a catastrophic event with AWS if AWS went down. As we were getting into AI, what's the impact of AI on these automated attacks? They're doing these models on all these scenarios to understand what's the overall risk.
Yeah. So then at what point did you think it's time, I'm going to start and build a company for myself?
Yeah, so I'm a builder, right? And when things get just pure play operational and I don't feel like I can have the same impact, start to get that itch. And so I remember specifically, I was going through this and I was like, you know what, I could see a career at Travelers, right? And see and just kind of coast off into the sunset. But I'm all about regret minimization. And so I remember going through and it's like, okay, I think I got one more in me. And what if I don't do this? What if I take the easy path out? Easy is subjective here, right? But I said to myself, I've got to at least try. And I knew I wanted to create a product company. All the companies I've worked at before were all on the services side, and said, I think I've got something to offer here. And regret minimization said, if I'm 80 years old, sitting on the park bench feeding those pigeons, I think I'd regret not giving this a shot. And I went through all this stuff. What's the worst that can happen, right? If I do give this a shot for 2 years, it doesn't work out, I'll go get another job somewhere, and I'll be okay. And I think the switch for me that really happened was, I was like, you know what? I've been doing security long enough where I've got a very particular view of how things operate, and I've got enough confidence in myself that I'll figure it out. Somebody told me recently, they said, you can't steer a parked car. You just have to get moving. But I think the thing that a lot of people just don't think of is you just have to have confidence in yourself that you might not have all the answers today, but you'll figure it out. And so for me, that was that turning point where I recognized the time is now. I felt comfortable. My teams from Corvus, they all found their spots at Travelers, and they're all in a good spot in their careers. So I said, okay, this is the right moment. And so I jumped and started Evoke Security with my co-founder, Jeffrey Chan, who Jeff and I worked at Mandiant. We worked together at Crypsis. We worked together at Mox 5. And we said, hey, let's give this a shot, you and me together from the very beginning.
How did you land on the problem space?
So when we first started off, we weren't sure exactly what we were going to do. But literally 2 days after we launched, I read a blog post from this company, Invariant Labs, on MCPs. And in particular, they're talking about this GitHub MCP server. And I read that, and I'm looking at this and going back to just like the lens that I have, just having grown up in incident response and being a CISO, I was like, we are making the same security mistakes that we have made time and time again. And I saw this thing, saw the infrastructure with MCPs, and was like, this is going to be a total cluster. And so I had spent 10 plus years responding to what happens when mistakes with the infrastructure goes wrong. It's like, you know what? I'm in a unique position where I've got something to offer here. I think we can make a difference. And I want to get ahead of the pain once and for all in my career, so that I'm not like picking up the pieces after the fact. Like this is the area, this is going to blow up. And then it became, okay, well, how do we solve this problem? What is the actual problem? And this was about the time where everyone was really focused on LLM guardrails. And I realized at that point, I was like, firewalls, we've done this before, didn't solve SQL injection, and then everyone thought that was going to be the path to go, right? It was firewall to next-gen firewall, to WAFs, or web application firewalls. And it never fully fixed the problem. And so as we were looking at this problem space, we said, okay, well, what's the least common denominator here? Like, well, it's the agent. The agent's the one thing that's never going to go away at this point. And so, as we started looking at this, I said, okay, well, where's the world going to go? It's like, agents aren't good enough yet, but I fully see the path that they're going and the trajectory they're on and how quickly they're advancing from the models. I said, well, I think in a year or two time, we're going to be in an environment where the agent is the next operating system for the employee. And so we went down this path and we shunned all the MCP gateways. We said that's a sprint to the wrong starting line, that the core is going to be the agent. And so we started building towards that. And we were too early to the problem. we're talking to people and they're just like, I don't care. Like, I'm not going to connect this to the internet.
Yeah.
OpenClaw. We're not going to connect this to the internet. What's the risk? And so, we went through it and we started to see coding agents get better and better. And going back to timing, we had built an endpoint sensor. And the week we finished our prototype was the week that Claude Cowork came out. And I spent 10 minutes playing around with this, and I was like, this is it. This is how you go from agents being an engineer thing to agents being in your finance team, your sales team. It's for the general knowledge worker. And so, we went all in on that. And since then, things have taken off, really focused on how do you secure that agent. And we took an approach of learn from EDR. That changed the way security was done for endpoints. And so we said there's a lot of similarities that we see here that agents are going to need. And that's why we went down this path of building the EDR for agents. It's really about detection and response, specific, purpose-built for agents.
Yeah. So EDR for AI agents. What's the approach then? Talk us a little bit more about the approach.
Yeah, so it's what you always expect in security. You start with visibility, right? So we look at this as, with agents, you have to understand the risk profile of each one. And so we start with visibility, say, what agents do you have? What are you connecting to them? What skills are you giving it? What MCPs are you connecting to it? What other tools are you giving it access to? What's the data that you give it access to? And so that creates this overarching threat profile right from the beginning. We take that information, we pump that into our risk engine, and now we're getting into security posture management, right? Where are the over-permissioned agents? Where do you have malicious skills or malicious MCPs? And this is all about understanding what is the starting blast radius that you have. But the difference here with agents compared to what we typically see with vulnerabilities and even endpoints is that risk is always changing. So there's a quote that you never step in the same river twice, right? Well, an agent doesn't step in the same token stream twice, because that connector to your email, that connector to Slack, it's all the data behind there that becomes a risk, because that context is constantly changing. And so that leads us into the EDR side of this, where we said, we don't care what model you're using. That is irrelevant to us in almost every situation, because what matters is, what is the action that this agent is taking, right? This is the EDR concepts at play. So we're looking at every single action that this agent is taking. We're looking to see, is this malicious? Is it safe? We're looking, is it on mission? What's the motive behind it? Is the task that it's trying to accomplish, is it reasonable for what's happening? And so this is where we get ourselves into a position where the OpenAI Hugging Face situation, and then Anthropic, where these agents are going rogue, you have to look at the action at the point in time and the trajectory it's on to figure out, is it reasonable? Is it on mission? Is this what you would expect to be happening? And this is so unique to agents. You don't have this problem with endpoints, right? Malware runs in a very certain way. You have your signatures. You've got the expected behaviors. It's malicious or not. It's a lot different when you're coming with agents, especially when you have humans operating behind agents as well.
Yeah. You mentioned uniqueness. In terms of like differentiation, I appreciate this space is absolutely going to have a few more companies similar to you. Can we talk a little bit more about the differentiation of Evoke and how you believe you're going to separate from the others? Yeah,
so early on we were the ones that made the bet on the endpoint. People called us crazy. I said, why endpoint, right? That EDR is going to cover that. And so we've got a solid endpoint sensor that's looking at where these agents are operating, right? But we grew up with production agents operating in hyperscalers. Guess what? Agents are going to be operating on your endpoint, and they're going to be operating in the Frontier Labs environments, and they're going to be operating in a sandbox sitting in a hyperscaler. We got visibility in all of that, right? So you need that visibility because agents are going to be running everywhere for the same task. Start something locally, let it run in the cloud to do some of the reasoning. We're going to totally expect models to be running locally on systems. So visibility is number one. You have to have those hooks into absolutely everything on where that agent is running. But the real differentiator, because I think visibility is going to become commoditized. It always does in security. So the real differentiator for us is that detection engine. And what we look at is you have to have a layered approach, right? It starts with signatures. Deterministic signatures, so that you know patterns that are absolutely malicious or just prone to risk, right? Secrets is a good example of this. Nothing fancy about that, but as that agent collects more and more secrets over time, and you see that in the context, that increases the blast radius. So you have to be looking at that. Then we're looking at anomaly detection, right? So this is more of that behavioral side. What is the agent doing? What's its baseline? What's normal? And what's normal for the human, right? So signature to anomaly based. And we're bringing in SLMs to start doing some of that reasoning-based detection as well, so that we can start looking across agent sessions, right? Across different tasks, agent-to-agent handoff. And then on top of that, we're also relying on LLMs for some of the triage analysis, right? And eventually we'll go all in on SLMs here, but it's this layered approach that goes from super high fidelity down to anomaly detection, which is very false positive prone, roping that back in with SLMs so that you can start to filter out some of these false positives, tie that with a bow with an LLM at the end to really get down to high fidelity. And you have to have that. Because if you don't, we see a lot of people going down this path of pure LLM or SLM. In a non-deterministic system, I don't want to rely solely on a non-deterministic solution to detect, and you are going to go bankrupt with that.
Yeah.
It's just, you're basically effectively doubling your costs right from the beginning with whatever you're paying to run AI. You can't be running a one-to-one for security there. It just it's not viable.
Yeah, nice. Okay, cool. I hope some of the marketing teams down on the conference floor have done a bit better at differentiating. all I've seen so far is AI security. So
I was talking to somebody yesterday about this, and they're like, everyone that's saying, "Hey, we secure agents," it's like, hey, we do cybersecurity.
No, yeah.
It's like, well, great. Well, what does that mean? What does it actually mean?
So I saw on LinkedIn you put a post up a couple of days ago, and it was regarding a keyword, and it was something like data injection prompt. What was that particular buzzword that you created? It was brilliant.
Which one was that?
It's like the data and prompt injection AI. I can't remember, but anyway, it was brilliant. It was a great LinkedIn post. I'll put it in.
I think that was from a paper, and I'm blanking on the name as well. But like this is the problem with security is that
another buzzword.
Every day a new thing. At the end of the day, what that was. It was indirect prompt injection,
yeah.
Right? But we got to come up with a fancy new name for everything. Unfortunately in security, we do ourselves a disservice by trying to get too creative with the marketing, which is why we have all these threat actors with fancy names now. At the end of the day, when you're looking at agent security, the things you got to watch out for, it is prompt injection, indirect prompt injection, but frankly, I think that's an overblown risk. It is a risk, but to me it goes back to the actions. What is your agent doing? Is it something you want it to do, yes or no? Is it going into risky territory? And basically, when is this agent about to explode, right, and cause you an actual security incident? That's a hard challenge to overcome, but this is why detection and response, I'm so convinced, is the future here, because you have to be monitoring those agents in a way that you can track what those actions are going to be and what the risk is to your company.
Yeah. Obviously AI is going to be a big topic of discussion over the next couple of days specifically, but I know when we spoke a few days ago we was talking about some of the myths of AI security. I'd like to just dive in on a couple of those. Like, what do you think about the space and what are some of the myths?
So I think the biggest myth right now is that everyone is solving agent security, right? We saw this at RSA. We're going to see the same thing with Black Cat. Every company is going to say, we solve agent security. And I think the myth here is that one company is going to be able to solve it. It's not the case. And I look at this as you have every security incumbent today saying that they're solving agent security, and they're approaching it in their narrow slice of the world, right? And so they're solving it in a vertical lens. I don't think you can do that, because AI is in a unique position where it goes across almost every single security domain. And so that's where I fully believe that startups are the best position right now to try to solve security for agents, because you have to be released from the constraints of what your narrow product lens is. You have to be looking at this across identity, across runtime, across the risk configuration side, because that's where you're going to get all of the context to understand what is this agent doing and is that risky or not. It is not just one pure play silo here. Yeah,
fair. Okay, excellent. And what's the future for Evoke? What's the plan?
So, we fully believe that the workforce is going to be agentic, right? As I do hate saying this, where people are going to be managing a team of agents. I think really what it's going to happen is you're going to be using AI, and you're not going to recognize it, but there's going to be a team of agents that are sitting underneath that prompt, getting some of this work done for you. And so what we look at is you have this growing workforce, predominantly digital, and you have to be looking at this from a new security lens. And so what I look at is, just as what EDR did for endpoints, we're going to be doing for agents, because it's going to be sitting in every organization in varying degrees, and it needs a new layer of visibility and control, and that's where Evoke's going to be.
Love it. Jason, I wish you all the best of success, my man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
The show.